All right, guys, so let's kind of get started. Where are we at here? All right, double period Monday. So I did you guys a little bit of a favor because I felt bad. The last double period Monday was kind of long. So your second period assignment's like 10 minutes long. It really shouldn't take you long at all. It's just literally copying down notes, answering two Regents questions, and that's it. So I would assume if you have lunch right after this, you maybe just want to do that really quick so you don't have to worry about it later. But I thought last week was a little too long, so we'll shorten this one up a little bit. I think today is a very interesting lesson. We are going to learn about what communism is. We're going to learn about how communism became one of the biggest fears in the United States at the time throughout the 1920s. Yeah, let's just get into it. So let's please, I'm sorry, of course, test is Friday. We'll speak more about the test on Wednesday and Thursday, but yeah, there's not much to it. I'll leave you a quizzes review, but that's about it. You guys are going to pretty much be on your own for the review. When is the last lesson we will do? Well, Wednesday is like the last lesson, but we watch a review video on Wednesday and Thursday, so kind of halfway through Wednesday. So let's see here. All right, let's go to this assignment. I'll give you a minute to write down the focus question and then just copy everything on the slide. I think that's just the best thing to do. I have all these different colors. The reason they're all in different colors is because we need to know what all these kind of different terms mean. You should already know what the blue is. You should already know what capitalism is, but we're going to go over all of them. So I'll give you a minute to get started and get a head start on that. Yes, Liz Mel, everything. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so I gave you a little time to copy this down. So now let's have a little bit of a conversation about this. So I'm going to say right from the start, if I have trouble teaching things unbiasedly, I tell you right from the start, and this might be one of those things. I'm going to tell you just right from the start, I am not the biggest fan of communism. I think it's a poor economic system. I don't think it's good. But as I'm going through and teaching this, I'm going to try and teach as unbiasedly as possible. But if you hear me kind of leaning towards favoring capitalism, that's just how it is, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean I'm right. It's just kind of how I feel about the whole situation. So if I come out a little biased, I apologize about that, but I will do my best to not. All right, who remembers in World War I what happens with Russia? I'll leave that to the chat. They had a revolution, okay? And what do they do during that revolution? What happens in World War I? Okay, so they left the war. Okay, why did they leave the war? Well, they had their own revolution. Kind of like we have the American Revolution, they had the Russian Revolution. And basically, they were very unhappy with their government. They were fighting in a war that not many people wanted to be a part of, and their people were severely struggling, okay? And the people that were severely struggling in their country were the poor, okay, and the working people. So long story short, you learn a lot more about this in 10th grade. Russia is going to leave because their government is going to get overthrown. All right, and their government that gets overthrown, okay, their leader, their czar, him and his whole family are going to be killed. It's not going to be a peaceful revolution. When they get killed, there's going to be a new group that steps in. Well, really, there's a group that steps in for 4 months, but after that new group, there's going to be a group called the Bolsheviks. And the Bolsheviks are going to be led by Vladimir Lenin, and they are going to come into power. And they are going to change their country from the country of Russia. And if you see on the top right, they are going to be known as the Soviet Union. So from this point on, for the rest of class until like May, mid-May, we're not going to know Russia as Russia. We're going to know it as the Soviet Union. And they're going to be a major country we're going to have a focus on. They're going to be a major country in World War II. They're going to be a major country in the Cold War. They're going to be a major country in this class. So we kind of need to know a little bit about them and why we really don't get along with them very well. All right. So the focus question is, what are the major differences between America's and the Soviet Union's economic system? So our country is called capitalism. We should know this very well. In a capitalist country, it's an economic system where individual citizens, us, we are responsible for selling things, buying things. All the industry, all the property is owned by the individual. Okay, so we are ultimately working towards our own success. Okay, and that leads to some problems, but ultimately we are trying to lead to our success. So if Mr. Panio works a job as a teacher, I am providing a service to you guys. I get paid for that service. Okay, when I get paid, I get to decide what to do with my money. Okay, this is a very basic idea of capitalism. This is a very basic idea of our country. All right, we should understand this at this point. This is not the first time I've gone over it. Okay, now we are going to learn the next two terms, socialism and communism. Now, for an 8th grade Regents class, you can kind of keep the words and terms kind of similar. Are socialism and communism different? Yes, they are. But for where you guys need to be educationally, you don't really need to know too much of the differences. It's like in our class, you don't really need to know the difference between the House of Representatives and the Senate. You have to know that there are some differences, but they're ultimately kind of working towards the same goal. Okay? So let's first start with socialism. Socialism is the term you won't see as much over the course of this class, but we need to know what it means before we get into communism. So socialism is an economic system where all goods, services, and money are shared equally amongst all the citizens. Okay? So if Mr. Panio works a job, okay, and let's say I get paid $50,000 a year, Ms. Peduzzi works a job, he's going to get paid $50,000 a year. Mr. Martinez works a job, the principal, he's going to get paid $50,000 a year. Pretty much everyone makes the same amount of money. Everyone gets the same things, and everything's equally shared amongst its citizens. Okay, it's not like people are trying to work individually for themselves. Everyone's trying to work socially and together to get what they want. All right, so all goods, okay, if a classic example I like to kind of give is, let's see, tonight I'm having pasta tonight for dinner. All right, it's my choice to have pasta for dinner. I get to have that choice. In a capitalist system, I have to go out and buy that food, okay, and then I have to bring it home and cook it. In a socialist system, the idea is that you won't have to pay for food, but you will be given food. All right, and you guys are actually more familiar with this than you realize. All right, you are in a public school. All right, that public school is free to you. So the public school is kind of like in what's called a socialist program. Okay, it's a service that is provided for the government. So some amount of socialism is obviously good. The lunch program is kind of a socialist program, right? You have like limited choices, but basically you're provided food for free. As far as I know, right, guys, when you go up to the lunch counter, that doesn't cost you or your family money, right? So that food is free to you. Okay? But not to go into the negatives, but I'm trying to give you kind of both perspectives. What would you guys rate the food at the school on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being the best. Oh my, really that bad? All right, 5, okay. I was hoping to hear like some 3s, 4s, 5s. I'm seeing some, okay. So you guys can get the sense that in this idea that if it's free, it's not necessarily free because the taxpayers are really paying for it, but for you it's free. But the quality when things are free usually aren't so great. All right, that's the reality of the situation. So you guys are familiar with that, whether you realize it or not, that kind of socialist program where you guys are basically given that food for free isn't necessarily the best quality. Now, when I went to school, when I was in middle school and high school, I'm not going to lie, the food at my school was good. And the reason why it was pretty good is it cost us money. So if I wanted a chicken wrap, it would cost me $4. All right, but the quality of the food was a little bit better. All right, now, here's where it comes to fairness and equity sometimes, right? Maybe it's not fair that, Mr. Panio comes to school with $5. I can afford that chicken wrap, right? But the student who's maybe a little bit poorer can't afford it, and now they can't get that good food. All right, now they're not eating. So that's also a little bit of a negative. So in a capitalist system, you have a lot of rich people, but you also have some very poor people. A socialist system, hypothetically, is everyone's kind of the same. There's no rich, there's no poor. Okay? So with that being said, now let's go to the term communism. And that's really the term that we're going to look under. So the Soviet Union's economy is called socialism under the government of communism. That's the best way I can explain it. Okay? So very often you'll have a socialist country and a communist country both kind of doing the same thing. Very like how in a capitalist country, it's very often you're a democracy. All right? They kind of work kind of the same. All right, so let's look at what communism is. So an economic system where all industry, trade, and property is owned by the government and is divided amongst its people based on need. Okay, so I'm going to break this down in the chat a little bit so you guys can understand. All right, capitalism. I'm going to write this in the chat. Mr. Panio works a job. He gets all the money from that job. Okay, so let's start with that. If you don't have a job, you get paid nothing. That's in a true capitalist society. We'll talk about Social Security and welfare another time when we get to the Great Depression. Okay, so you see capitalism. Socialism. Mr. Panio works a job and he gets the average amount of money from the job. If you don't have a job, you still get the average amount of money. Okay? Communism goes a step further. Mr. Panio works a job and he doesn't get any of the money. All money goes to the government, let's say, and the government divvies out the money the best way they see fit. Okay, so let me see if I could find a good photo here. 1 second. Capitalism, socialism. Let's see here. Let's see. Bear with me, guys. I should have had this done already, but it just came to. All right, I think I got it here. All right, don't look at the fascism one right now, but this is kind of the idea. So This is a little bit biased towards in favor of capitalism, but I just want you to kind of see it. So communism is, right, you have two cows, okay? The state takes both of the state is the government. The government takes both of the cows and they give you some milk, okay? They're not yours, those cows. They are the government's property, basically. Socialism is very straightforward. You have two cows, you give one to your neighbor who doesn't have a cow. Keep things equal. Don't worry about fascism. Traditional capitalism is basically you have two cows, and you basically get to decide what you want to do with those cows. That's the best way I can kind of explain it. All right, so there are these systems that are a little bit different in theory. There are these systems that are a little bit different in how they operate. And these ideas became basically so thought out to be completely different. So capitalist people thought that they were 100% correct. Communist people thought that they would be 100% correct. And it started to lead to these huge debates and sometimes these huge problems within the country. All right. Now I want to give you this warning right now. Later on, I think tomorrow, first thing, you are actually going to vote. I'm not kidding. I do this every year. So just think about this. You are actually going to vote if you want me to grade your test on Friday as a capitalist or as a communist. So you really want to know what these two words mean, because I will grade it any way the class votes. Okay? So start to keep that in mind, because you guys are kids. You guys don't make money at this point for the most part, but you guys do make grades. Okay? Well, that's up to you to decide, Neve. That's going to be up to your class to decide. In a communist country, correct. Maheen, pretty much. In a communist country, a doctor would make the same as a janitor, because they're not working for themselves. The idea in communism and socialism is they're working together for the country. All right, so a doctor and a janitor would hypothetically make the same amount of money, where in a capitalist system is obviously the doctor would get paid more than the janitor. Okay, let's move on and let's just kind of go through this. The only thing you need to write down in this slide is the nickname for communism. Correct, Aura. The government is divided, the government sees best. That is communism. In true socialism, is everyone just kind of makes the same thing. Everyone has the same things. Everyone has the same houses. Everything's equal. All right, but in a communist society, the communist government kind of divvies out where they want the money to go. It's based on need. Okay? It's a little bit complicated, but that's the general idea. So please just copy down the nickname for communism is red, because you're going to hear the term red a lot. You're going to learn the Red Scare today. You're going to learn about the Red Scare, the second Red Scare in the 1950s. You're going to see this term a lot. If you've noticed, a lot of these slides, okay, towards the beginning, oh my God, but like I put it in like red and yellow because Roaring '20s has to do with communism a little bit, and that's the nickname. And that's the way it looks there. Okay, so let's just look here. So let's first take a look at the top here, capitalism versus communism. In capitalism, individuals own property and the means of production. So Jeff Bezos owns Amazon. He's the one that owns that company. He makes a lot of the profit from that company. His goal is to make the best possible product to sell so people could buy it. So he makes the most money for himself. You know, capitalism, I guess, is inherently people want to be greedy to make money for themselves. All right. You also own your own property. So if you own a home, that's your home. You could do with it whatever you want with it. Okay. In communist country, you don't own your own home. You don't own your own property. That is basically your property is owned by the government and owned by the community. All right. All the products that are made, all the cell phones, all the video games, that's owned by the government. Okay. Now in our country, there's certain things the government owns. Okay. But for the most part, most of the stuff you buy are made by, individual companies or corporations. All right. So if you're wearing Nike sneakers, that's made by the corporation of Nike, who has, they have their individuals who sell that company and sell the product. Okay. Sometimes, like my wife has a teacher bag business. Okay. She owns the teacher bags. You buy it from her. She gets the profit off it. Okay. She's providing a product for you guys to use. That is capitalism. If my wife lived in, let's say, North Korea, where they're still communists today, she doesn't make money off that product. Okay, the government owns it. The government gets that money. Okay? Businesses follow their self-interest through competition, causing good wages. So the idea is that the better the business, the more wages they can kind of produce. Okay? In communism, self-interest leads to greed. All right, so businesses take advantage of the workers. All right, am I glitching, guys? Am I okay? Okay. In capitalism, consumers determine what products are needed. So if a product is very good, a lot of people will buy it. Therefore, that's going to help out the company. Okay, we just talked about cars, how cars are now a very big thing in the country. Everyone wanted a car, so therefore, many people bought a car that made the price of the car be more affordable and better. Okay, in a communist society, they're like basically saying, you know, goods should be divided according to the people's needs. The public are the ones that sets the price, not the corporation. All right. In a capitalist society, if they made the price of we talked about pencils before, if they made the price of the pencil, you know, $10,000, no one's going to buy it. Okay. People are going to buy things that they think are a good price. In a capitalist society, government should not interfere in the economy. Where in a communist society, the community or government should plan the economy. All right. So let's go to this reading. We're going to do it together before you do the assignment. Okay, I think the reading will give some very good insight on what this is, and it'll kind of lead into the Red Scare. So you could open it up. Let's follow along, and we will go over it. Okay. So communism and socialism is kind of a very new thought comparatively in history. All right, it started really in 1848. In 1848, two German economists and philosophers, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, published a book that frightened most of the Western world. The book was named Manifesto of the Communist Party, and it spoke about a new economic system that revolved around the working class. So the working class are the people who are doing the majority of the work. What I mean is they're doing most of the jobs. So in a school, the teachers are the working class, and the principal is like the boss. Okay, so the working class are the ones that are doing like the most grunt work, I guess you could say. To Marx and Engels, wealth should be distributed evenly among the workers, and it was the workers who should own the means of production instead of a single individual. Okay, so we'll go back to Amazon. The workers don't own Amazon, Jeff Bezos does. So Jeff Bezos basically gets to determine what he wants to do with Amazon. The workers don't. The workers work for him. All right. Communism kind of turns that whole thing over. Communism basically says that the workers should basically make all the rules. All right. Workers barely making enough money to feed their hungry families and seeing their bosses live lives of luxury were quickly attracted to this new idea. All right. So if you're struggling to make ends meet and your bosses are living it up and having a great life, that creates a lot of jealousy. Marx and Engels argued that capitalism, the economic system that currently dominated the nations of the world, like the United States has, was inherently greedy and corrupt. In capitalism, individuals, not the government, own property and the means of production. This means that people own factories and their own businesses, and they make decisions about what to produce, how much the product should cost, and how much their workers should be paid. To Marx and Engels, the system was unfair, since they believed business owners, in their greedy pursuit to accumulate wealth, would always pay their workers as little as possible. Okay? Let's look at the top right here with the yellow box. All right, I think it's important to read. Capitalism argues in that simple economic concepts keep the market in check, meaning it's not going to get too crazy. For example, the price of goods and services is determined by supply and demand. If an employer needs a worker that has a specialized skill, like let's say a brain surgeon, then the job will pay more than a skill that requires a basic skill like a garbage man. Okay? This is because the supply of workers who have the specialized skill to operate on a human brain is much less than the number of people who can pick up and throw away trash. Okay? It doesn't mean that picking up trash and throwing it away is an easy job. It just means it's a little harder to learn. Right? Anyone could, do certain jobs. Anyone could be a garbage man. Anyone could sweep. Anyone could do certain things. Doesn't mean it's an easy job. Anyone can be a waiter or a waitress. I was a waiter. Waiter to me was a much harder job for me than being a teacher. All right, but I didn't need as much education. I didn't need to learn as much to be a waiter. It was just a hard job being on your feet all that time and dealing with all those customers. Another concept inherent in capitalism is free competition. Businesses compete freely, which naturally drives down the cost of a product. We know this with the pencils. If Milagros is a pencil owner and she makes it 5 cents and Mr. Panio makes it $1,000 and we give the same quality of product, you're going to buy Milagros' product every time. And I'm going to go out of business. Since customers almost always look for the best value when buying a product, the business that provides the best product or service for the money will be rewarded with the transaction. Okay, and that's something you see in a capitalist economy. Have you guys, I mean, you're young, but write in the chat if you've ever gone to a store, whether it's a clothing store or a restaurant, and been like, I'm not paying that money, it's too expensive, and it's not good enough for me to buy. Like, do you guys go to store and like say, I want to buy that, but like you can't, it's too expensive or something? Does that happen with you guys? I mean, everyone does. This is a common thing. I went to a store and they said that a sandwich was going to cost $12. Like, I just started laughing. I'm like, no, I'm not paying that. I'll go to another store and get it for $6. Okay, I don't care how good the price is. You know, and then other times I'll be like, you know what? I want a fancy steak. I'm going to go to a steak restaurant and pay $100 for a steak. You know, it depends what you want and what you're willing to give up. All right, back on the third paragraph here. I know it's a lot of me talking, but this takes a while for me to explain. Marx and Engels argued that the government, which represents the people, should own everything and distribute the wealth among the workers to create a more equitable society. That is a big term the last couple of years in this country, and it's a term you got to be careful with, because socialism and communism sometimes leads to equity, which is basically everyone getting what they need to be successful, which sounds good. We just got to be careful, because too much equity could lead to a completely different type of economy and government. The two predicted that the gap between the rich and the poor would be eliminated and economic equality would finally be achieved. The economic system is known as socialism. Eventually, Marx hoped the final phase of socialism, known as communism, would take hold. Socialism and communism are very similar. They both advocate government control of production and a fairer or more equitable distribution of income to the people. So a big thing you may see is, you know, a person makes $10 million, makes a great life for themselves, but then they're really, 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 really poor people, okay? The idea of communism and socialism, if you can see my hands, is bringing it to be more equitable, where you don't have as many rich people, you don't have as many poor people, they kind of come to the middle. Capitalism is the complete opposite. Capitalism is like, we don't care how much the rich people make. Let them make as much as possible, okay? And if a person's poor, they need to try and bring themselves up to get more money. They're not going to try and close the gap, okay? They're just going to try and keep the rich up here and try and bring the poor up, so to speak. However, socialists believe that people should still be able to own private property, and citizens should be allowed to vote on the direction of government spending. All right, so socialism is not as intense as communism. Okay, there's still some freedom in socialism. In communism, there's no freedom. Okay, that's a whole other thing we'll talk about later on when we get more into the Soviet Union. In communism, however, there's only one political party. There's no competition among different economic ideas, no individual voting, no personal property, no basic freedom, basically. Did the U.S. ever have a communist/socialist leaning president? No. Okay, I would say no. It's a complicated thing. There were some candidates, like Eugene Debs ran for president, okay, and didn't win, but he was a socialist candidate. Some of the more recent Democrats have had some more socialist policies. Lyndon Johnson would be a great example. We'll learn about him. Barack Obama with his Medicare, his Obamacare. Obamacare was like kind of a socialist idea, but he's not a socialist president, but you could have socialist leaning policies, that's for sure. If Bernie Sanders, if you knew who that was, he was pretty open socialist. So he would call himself a democratic socialist, but ultimately he would be someone, if you remember who he was and know who he is, he's a good example of that. And this is the last couple things. In socialism, wealth is distributed based on an individual's productivity. You work more, you get more, which is, a good idea. In communism, wealth is distributed based on an individual's need. If you need more, you get more from the government. Okay, so if you're homeless in a communist society, they're going to do a lot to get you out of homelessness. During the First World War, the ideas put forth in the manifesto of the Communist Party were set into motion. That's the name of the book by Karl Marx. First in the Revolution in 1917 and later in China in the 1940s. The fear of communism and its spread, nicknamed the Red Scare because the communist flag was red, soon reached the United States and consumed the American public, the media, and government officials. All right, so before you guys get into this question, we have one more slide we need to do. Okay, and these aren't it. That's the slide, but let's just quickly go through this very quick. I don't really care about what's on the slides. I want you to look at why the Soviets, okay, the Soviet Union wouldn't like capitalism so much. Okay, and it's basically like showing like the people at the bottoms, they're the ones holding up the workers, right? They're the ones holding up the rich, which are right here if you follow my mouse. Then they're holding up the military. Okay, then they're holding up the church. And then they're holding up the kings and the queens and the leaders. Oh, sorry, guys. Thank you. All right, so just to show you again, I don't need you to write any of this down, but I'm just showing you the origins of the Red Scare. Notice how at the bottom here, these people are holding up, okay, they're the workers. They're the ones that are holding up everyone. They're holding up the rich, okay, and then they're also holding up the military, and they're also holding up the church, and they're also holding up the rich. The kings and queens and leaders. And all at the top of a capitalist society is just money. Everyone's trying to get to the money back. Okay, but it really is the workers that are doing most of the work, and that's the idea of communism and why it's a good thing. Okay, but please copy down this slide. This is called the Red Scare. I'll give you a minute to do it, and then we'll discuss what it is. No, because I'm taking the Regents questions. You know what I mean, Anicia? I'm taking the Regents questions that go along with it, so it's like coming right from the state. So no, that shouldn't be. All right, so let's take a look at the Red Scare. So the Red Scare was a time in the 1920s where people saw what happened in Russia and were very worried about it for a couple of reasons. Number one, Russia was a very strong and powerful country like the United States was. So they basically saw, okay, well, if the people could overthrow their government and put in a new government with a new style in Russia, it could happen here in the United States. All right, so people kind of got worried about that. All right. People were also kind of fearful of this idea. Labor unions. Let's go back to labor unions for a second. Labor unions are made up of the workers of a particular group. So you guys know I'm a part of the teachers union. The teachers union are the workers working together. Okay, and you guys can remember that a lot of labor unions would go on strike. So throughout the 1920s, a lot of these labor unions started to go on strike. And it almost started to feel like, hey, a lot of these labor unions, those are a lot of the workers, maybe they want a new form of government. Okay, because when a communism or socialism comes to a country, it's going to come from the people that are very poor and struggling. If things are going very well and you're making money, you don't want to change the amount of money you're making. But if you're really struggling, you maybe say like, hey, maybe this capitalist form of government's not so good. Okay? So a lot of people in America became fearful of this because A lot of people in America, didn't want communism to take over. But then there were these groups of people in our country who were more wanting that to happen. So many Americans would become less tolerant of the Russians and many immigrants because of their fear of communism. The idea was if you let in some Russian and Soviet Union people, then that could lead to people being persuaded to eventually accept communism. All right, so this became a real big fear in the United States. All right, and it comes from two places. People were fearful of, I'm not kidding, workers / poor people and immigrants. I'm going to write this down so you make sure I'm clear. So workers and poor people were fearful of them, and immigrants. Does anyone remember back in the beginning of Unit 4, we looked at two major immigration laws that limited immigration throughout this time that took place in the 1920s. So there were two immigration laws that limited immigration. The Gentleman's Act is not one. Great try. The quotas is correct. The Quota Act is one. Okay, that came out for big reason because of communism. Okay, and then there was another one that has like 4 different names that incorporated quotas but wasn't called the Quota Act. Not the Chinese Exclusion Act. Good try. That took place in the 1880s. It's a good mistake, Rosemary. The other one, which isn't as popular, is known as the National Origins Act. Okay, and you pair that with the Quota Act. These two laws were kind of put together because of the Red Scare and people being fearful of a communist takeover. All right, so they wanted to limit immigration, and they were fearful of the workers kind of taking over. Okay, so let me establish something first before I give you a little bit of time to work on the assignment. I'll give you like 5 minutes. Okay, don't worry about this. This is all cool stuff, but not something we have to know about. Okay. I'm going to try and bring this opportunity to you as a class to vote on. Okay, so tomorrow you're going to get a Google form. Okay, I'm going to show you exactly what that Google form is. Okay, right now. Looks like this. You're going to get 2 choices as a class, and I'm going to take whatever the majority wants to do. Okay, do you want me to grade your Unit 5 Roaring 20s, Unit 5 test as a capitalist or a communist? Okay, and I'll read this here. If I grade it, this is test on Friday. If I grade it as a capitalist, whatever your individual grade is what I will be putting on Jupiter. So if Rosemary takes the test and Rosemary gets a 94, Rosemary gets a 94. If Gentiana takes the test, and we know this ain't going to happen, so we'll just joke around a little bit. If Gentiana takes the test and she gets a 35, Rosemary gets a 94, Gentiana gets a 35. That's the way you've been graded probably for the last 8 years in school, and definitely every test from 8. So if you want me to grade it like that, okay, I can do it like that. If you want me to grade it as a communist or a socialist, I will take the average from all the 8th grade classes and everyone will get the same grade average. They've already taken their unit test, so I already know what their average is. I can't tell you that at this point, but whatever your guys' grade is, combined with their average, everyone gets that. So if the grade average is an 85, everyone gets an 85. If the grade average is a 67, everyone gets a 67. If the grade average is a 97, everyone gets a 97. So you guys can all work together if you want. What is the lowest score someone have got for a test? A 0. What's usually your average? Your average is usually, I'll tell you the average on the last test. Give me 1 second, okay, guys? All right, so we'll take AT1 because they have the most students. So on the last test, the Unit 4 test, the class average for the Unit 4 test Hold on. Why can't I get it? The Unit 4 test average was an 81. That was just 8D1 though. You had some zeros in there, obviously. But it was an 81. Would it be this would be the whole 8th grade, Aura? I mean, think about it. You guys are in the top class, so this is good. I mean, it's great for you guys, but society consists of usually very rich people, very poor people, and you're usually going to take the average of that. So in a socialist society, let's say, everyone, the rich people, the poor people, they're putting all their money together, and then it's given out evenly. All right? So I'm going to give you all 24 hours to think about it. And then tomorrow I see you 5th period, okay? And you'll take whatever the class average is. If you vote communist or socialist. If you don't want to do that, then you just vote capitalist tomorrow. I will do whatever the majority of the class wants, okay? Unrelated, Maheen. Yes, Maheen, kind of. All right, if you guys are going to be a little political now, and you want to get people to vote a certain way. That's completely fine, but we could do the class average too. All right, it's up to you guys. All right. Okay, so there's about 3 minutes left in class. That is a long lesson. It's a lot to take in. The assignment for today is just we've already done the reading, so now it's just literally answering these questions. Okay, you'll see that there's 2 short answer questions, then 3 multiple choice questions. You can do that. Okay, just get this done by the end of the day. I will go back, Rosemary. I want to say a couple things before we go. When you come in tomorrow, you will obviously take that little quick quiz just to see what we want to do and see if we want to take it as a capitalist or communist. Okay. Your period 2 lesson, you only have to watch this YouTube video, but you only have to watch 10 minutes of it. Please note, you have to watch this from 1:30 to 11:52. You take your notes, you answer the 2 Regents questions, and that's it. You attach it to here. All right. The previous slide, meaning this one, right, Rosemary? Okay. The attached article has the questions, Moise. So we did the article together. We read it together. The questions are at the bottom, so just look at the questions. You can't write on the PDF, though, so that's why you're just writing on the Google Doc. Right, so the article's there to help you in case you have to answer some of the questions. All right, you guys are free to go now. Have a great rest of your day.